not necessarily put on grid design. It's kind of sort of walkable. So yeah, it has that vibe, But yeah, I totally get what you're saying. A lot of, I think, cities in the US obviously designed around the car. So it's one of those where you're in a box, you go to a box, you go to another box, and you don't have the foot sort of experience that you might get in a European city, which I think is one of the best parts of being in Europe, is to be able to walk around. Yeah,
absolutely.
Was there a favorite city in Europe, Mehul?
Oh my, it's difficult because each city has it's kind of like you feel their identity, right, when you go visit them, right? Like you roam around in London, and it has like you do see that, you sense the pride and the history, and every square that you encounter, there's somebody, like, oh, this guy 1800 something, Sir XYZ ABC, blah blah blah, right? As soon as you come to Paris, right? I mean, I'm not an artisty guy, right? But if you go to Louvre, right? I mean, you definitely feel wow, right? I mean, like, so the art is imbibed in the identity of the city, right? So it's
100%. And the architecture very differently. Paris very different architecturally to London. Both great in their own ways, but yeah, absolutely, they have different character. And all of those things like make a big difference. Like a big difference I think between UK and continental Europe is the cafe culture generally, where at every kind of cross section in seemingly in France and Italy, Spain, places like that, you will have a sort of a cross section where there's shops, cafes, places like that, and that's where lots of people congregate and have outdoor culture. In the UK, you tend not to have that. It's the weather is not suitable for it, so it tends to be more around like pubs and stuff of that nature. Anyway, we should talk about that a bit later, Mehul, because we are live. We're live, everybody. We are talking about traveling. We're going to get into it because Mehul is an international entrepreneur. We're back, folks, with Founders Focus. This is the favorite thing for me to do. We've had a bit of a break because we've taken sort of some time over the summer really to recalibrate and to speak to more entrepreneurs who want to be taking part in this, and we're pleased to bring the show back on the road, episode 32. And this is the show where we get up close and personal with the people that are making technology change in the way in which we recruit and work today. I want to know exactly what is driving these people. What is it that they've learned through their entrepreneurial journey, and what is their vision for the future of work that we're all participating in? So welcome everybody to the show, and welcome Mehul Bhatt, CEO of FloCareer. So Mehul, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
It's great. Let's start. Firstly, you're a busy CEO. You're running a recruiting technology business. It's always going to be 24/7. What did you cancel, Mehul, in order to come on to Founders Focus today?
So I had to shorten our daily account management meeting a little shorter, and there was one more follow-up in-house kind of our own internal meeting which we had to postpone. But yeah, not bad.
Right. So I apologize to your account management team that did not get the full support from the CEO today because of the requirement to come online and speak to me. So I do thank you for this. I'm always conscious, by the way, Mehul. I know how important the CEO time is. And I'm thinking, you know what, we better make sure this 1 hour is worth it for FloCareer. So Mehul, let's sort of rewind back in time. We ended up talking about sort of your journey, going for living in India, going to education in the US, and then building kind of a technology career, successful technology career in San Francisco. That's almost like the classic immigrant storyline, isn't it? Like people imagine this thinking, okay, you work really hard, you get your academic skills, you get into a US university, and then boom, you have a chance working in the Silicon Valley. Take us through that right when you decided that journey was the right thing. When did you decide to come to America, Mehul?
So, back in the undergrad studies, right, I was one of those like many, happy-go-lucky guy, doing my studies and, having fun in college and whatnot. it was in the final years of, this was the mid 90s, it was the final year of my college when we realized that, man, there are not a lot of opportunities here in India, so we have to do something. And that's when we realized that, okay, but there's a lot of things opening up, especially, in the computer networking and those kind of areas, which I found somehow naturally inclined to in my, final year of education. So I thought, okay, let me continue this journey abroad, and then we'll see, what life brings, right? So yeah, that was the idea that, okay, this is the area which I really find. My undergrad was in electronics and communication, but we had one subject on networking towards the end of the last semester. So that's when I decided, okay, this is very, very interesting. Let's continue this journey. So
and perfect timing as well in terms of the sort of educational experience with the sort of maturity of the technology at the time. Internet, I think, if I recall, late 90s was more or less when internet was suddenly, okay, this is a thing properly. I think in the mid 90s, you still had internet skeptics. I mean, I know a lot of people watching this show are probably too young to even believe this could possibly be the case, because the internet is ubiquitous, right? Most of us are probably looking at the internet first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening. But in the mid 1990s, there were still people saying, yeah, this is just a fad. It's not going to go anywhere. But by the late 90s, it was pretty self-evident. It was going to be like a big game-changing kind of category. And of course, entering it into that space was perfect timing.
Absolutely.
How was it to sort of, as a young kid, sort of young Indian kid in America? How was that? How was your first year? Your first year acclimating to a different culture? Take us through that sort of experience, Mehul.
So I came to IIT Chicago for my master's degree, and by the time you reach the master's degree, at least you don't have a lot of so-called identity crisis, right? You kind of you have your friends, you kind of focused on your studies, and so that acclimatization was not a big issue, and I really enjoyed studying. I had a wonderful graduate advisor. Some of the professors, I'm still in touch with them, and I got an opportunity to work at the Fermi Lab, like astrophysics, and those are like pure science is also kind of my hobby. So it was great working for Fermi Labs in the summer intern, and it was really fabulous. I really enjoyed studying at IIT Chicago, yeah, absolutely, that was fun.
It's actually great that the maturity of the person is important when you're making a big change, because I think entrepreneurship is one of those things that often does require big change. If you're like typically. Again, this is pre-COVID. Maybe things will be changing now, and how entrepreneurship might be more remote driven. But not so long ago, if you weren't moving to a big city, it basically was not going to be happening for you in terms of building a technology product. Like, you had to make that choice to say, right, I have to move to London, or I have to go to Berlin, or you have to go to San Francisco. You couldn't do it from a regional town. So a lot of people, I think, that life circumstance of changing their life circumstance is actually really difficult. And it would be interesting to know where, the new future that we see now, where we might be building remote first companies from the beginning. Maybe there's a different entrepreneurial process that will emerge from that route. But it's going to be an interesting challenge to see whether you get the same degree of sort of inspiration working entirely remotely that you would otherwise get when you're kind of working in cheek by jowl with other people. Take me through that experience. When you moved to San Francisco, you worked for a bunch of startups, some of which became really successful. What was your big learning from your experience of being part of companies that ended up being successful that way?
That's a very good thought, because you are talking about the remote first and so on and so forth. But there are definitely your surroundings, the environment, the whole ecosystem, which plays a big role for sure, right? I mean, even in US, if you see the Bay Area versus outside of the Bay Area, this is definitely it has always been a huge, cultural gap. Uh, I kind of worked in the last semester in Chicago with a company, and it was year 2000, and people still didn't know anything in Chicago about stock options or startups or anything like that. Right? It was like a decent 30-40 people size company, and one of my very close friend convinced me that, hey, if you are into the computers and high tech jobs, the Bay Area is the place to be, right? So I took my one way ticket, went to Bay Area, and it was the crazy time. The dot-com bubble was like at its peak, right? Santa Clara Convention Center in Bay Area was every weekend almost there was a job fair. Uh, and everyone is talking about startups and stock options and you know the live and breathe. What is the market doing today? So so that was an interesting. That was one of the pivotal decision to go to Bay Area. It definitely helped a lot. Worked with a lot of smart people. My mentor in my first job, Ron Frederick, was in fact one of the first writers of the RTP protocol, the streaming protocols. He
That we're
was a
using right now. Yep.
yeah. Like
Amazing. Yep.
this was in 1980s that they wrote those protocols, late 80s and early 90s.
That's incredible.
So yeah, we're lucky to
So,
be part of that ecosystem.
and you know what, you look back on it. I mean, obviously, you've got a long way to go in terms of your entrepreneurial journey, Mehul. So that you never want to be premature in looking back, but to be in that era in the dot-com bubble at the beginning was probably a remarkable period, because that is unlikely to be repeated. You can see that the future will look differently in a more distributed fashion. I only read today, I think in Stack Overflow blog, that one of the big characteristics of this new era we're in is actually a loss of talent from those places that previously had sucked in a lot of talent. San Francisco, I think, is the metropolitan center in the US that has had the biggest decrease in population, I think, over the past 3 years compared to other places. So it seems to be the case that a lot of technology companies are thinking, let's build elsewhere. We can do it more remotely. We can access different types of talent. And yeah, that sense of excitement, will it come back? I don't know. Something to chew down on and figure out. Talk to me about startup lessons that you learned in that time that you have been able to apply to FloCareer. So you worked in a bunch of startups early on. They were successful. What did you take from that experience that you could say, you know what, if I ever do my own thing, this is what it's going to look like?
Yeah, so to be very honest, during those early days, I didn't have a very clear kind of a life plan to be an entrepreneur, in those early 2000s. But definitely the lessons learned during those years, helped me a lot. A few things are always, which is very critical for startup is, kind of, you are okay with the uncertainties, like, things can go anywhere, and the resilience of the company that I was working for, Cashflow, Cashflow became Blue Coat later on, right? And had a very interesting journey. So, quarter to quarter, life was different, right? It was like it can go anywhere, up and down, and the resilience of the company, the resilience of the management, and the adaptability, those were, lifelong lessons that I learned, right? And there is always this, the balance between the architectural purity versus time to market, right? And the startup has to make sure that the time to market is properly kind of weighed in, right? So those were like very, very important learnings, which I was able to continue taking with me those in my own journey too.
There's two elements here I want to touch on, Mehul, because they're both very interesting. Dealing with uncertainty, I think that is one of those sort of cliches that is true. Within startup is true, but also as the world externally becomes more uncertain, these skills are going to be super important for everybody. To be able to basically make decisions with slightly less information than you're used to. right? If you're able to make a decision on 80% information, guess what? The modern era, you might need to have to make that decision on 57% information. And your ability to still make that decision and commit to it is, I think, an important skill. And then, of course, probably the error rate will go up, in which case your ability to respond to a mistake or respond to a false move and quickly recover is another skill that is important to develop. How do you develop that skill, like from an individual perspective? How do you kind of build that ability to bounce back or that ability to make a risk?
That's a good question. If you think about it, right, another element to what you just mentioned, right, is also now everywhere the time is shrinking, right? What used to be like, if you look at every aspect of our life, right, things are faster, quicker. Now you watch Netflix. There's no even time to look at the credits. The next episode starts in 5 seconds. I was just watching documentary for a change while I was on the flight, and I realized that I find it now so slow because you are used to your customized YouTube content that you want to watch. So not only you have to make decisions with less amount of information, but even now lesser amount of time. Right? Uh, Personally, what has helped me, and everybody has their own ability to kind of deal with this, but personally, what has helped me is kind of developing a much larger context to any problem in life, right? If you look at a much bigger context, right? Even taking it to your lifespan, or I'm a geeky guy, I'm a sciencey guy, so the whole the Earth has been around 4.5 billion years, right? And your time is very short, right? So why to waste it for the nonsense things and just focus on the important stuff, right?
So you're talking about like zooming out from the current situation, the immediate situation, and just contextualizing yourself into that, and almost making it saying whatever decision it is going to be insignificant in that broad schema, even though emotionally it may feel like very significant, but in the broad schema, it's actually not a big deal. That then causes you the ability to make that decision with the same degree of decisiveness than you would sort of normally take in a more predictable world, let's say.
And you that helps you to take risk which otherwise you might not take. You might think, oh my god, if I do this, what's going to happen, blah blah blah. In fact, my decision to move back to India was kind of influenced mostly because of that too. And I know you are kind of progressing slowly, step by step. But if I look back, the only reason I wanted to move back to India was to, that again larger perspective. Right? Then I don't want to look back at my life and see, hey, what would have happened if I have done that, right? So, what's the big deal? Just go ahead and do it. Worst case, you can always come back. So.
That's absolutely right. There's a guy who I'm speaking to, and this is on like a Hacker News thread or something, but he posted something online to say he's a first jobber, and he's being made another job offer in a different city. He wants to go to the city. It's good money. It's all this. But then he said something about, it's a huge risk because he's got a currently happy job, loves his team, loves his manager, loves everything. What do I do? And I actually commented to say, I'd straight away said, just take the job. Because let's be clear, number one, it's not an irreversible decision. Like you're thinking about it as a completely decisive scenario. It isn't. You go there, worst case, doesn't work out, 3 months, you're back, no worries. Or you find another job, especially if you have a highly in-demand skill set, then actually there is no degree of you're not that vulnerable to being sort of unemployed if you are highly skilled in the man. Secondly, it's like the worst case scenario is not worst case scenario. It's like you go and take the job, and you'll basically be able to build some, and it's a mistake, but you'll be able to build some ability to make mistakes and understand it's not a big deal. That in itself is a hugely valuable lesson. And again, You're not signing an indentured contract where you're committed for 5 years or whatever. Yes, it says, impermanent, but you can leave this job at will, no problem. And the biggest risk, actually, which we know by data, is to stay overly long in your current business, because we know, for instance, that if let's say optimizing compensation was important, we know that staying in the same company is actually the biggest suppressant for your compensation. Yeah, it kind of you jump in steps rather than incrementally up. So anyway, I give him quite strong advice to say take the role. I'm not sure whether he has or not or whatnot, but anyway. Interesting. You mentioned going back to India, Mehul. This is quite an important trajectory. So basically, a couple of startups, they were successful, they exited. Tell us a little bit about that, and what was the trigger that caused you to go back to India?
So, like many immigrants, the thought of going back is always in most immigrants' minds. Someday I will go back, or after I reach certain milestone, or after I retire, or whatever, right? So people always have those thoughts in their minds. And when my second startup that I was working for that got Nova Systems that got acquired by Cisco, and Cisco has a huge presence in India. So I thought that, okay, I can take this opportunity, go back to India. At least one of the variables will not change. I will still continue to work for the same company, same group, and let's try it out. And my wife was also quite supportive on that, and we always wanted to try it out and see how it goes. It's not an irreversible situation given my immigration status at that point of time. So then what's the big deal? Let's try it out and see how it goes, right? So it was purely driven by that experimental kind of mentality that, okay, let's try it out and see if we can be the part of the growth story over there, and see how it goes.
I was about to say, like, that 10-year gap has probably changed. India had gone through this tremendous change in that period of time. It was obvious to me when I actually first visited Bangalore that it was a city at the time in the middle of massive change, because you could see the juxtaposition between super modern sort of stuff, and then within 10 meters there would be stuff that would be super legacy, and there would be like within the same screenshot. If you could take a picture, you'd take it the same thing. That only happens when you have accelerated growth, and it's going like this. So that in itself is actually a really smart entrepreneurial advice, to kind of just go to where the growth is. Rather than have some genius idea. You don't need the genius idea per se. If you have one, amazing. But actually, if you know that this is a growth area, a growth country, a growth industry, a growth something, just being in around that kind of gives you much more opportunity to succeed than if you end up in a place or in an industry that is trending down for whatever reason. So, I totally get that. That was you could calculate the risk a little bit and think, okay, let's give this one a shot. Tell us about doing entrepreneurship in India, because was that different from the US? And if so, how so?
So to be very honest, in US, I myself was not an entrepreneur. I was part of the startup. I learned a lot, but when you put your own, fixed guaranteed salaries at risk, that's a completely different ballgame, right? So, but one difference I would say is for sure that given the fact that the standard of living, living expenses are less, so you can afford to kind of take risk for a longer period of time compared to, let's say if I would have been in Bay Area, I couldn't have survived without salaries for probably more than a year or year and a half. Who knows?
It's pretty good if you can survive for a year without salary in San Francisco.
So that way it was very helpful to kind of, I started playing around in 2015-16 timeframe. I attempted one thing that didn't go so well. Then me and my co-founder, we kind of repivoted everything, started with a different idea and whatnot. So that, despite having the first failure, I was still able to try the second one. That's because I was, living in India.
That's actually a really interesting and important point to make. because you wonder how many entrepreneurial journeys end at the first failure. And that itself is a tragedy, because if you look at the people that have succeeded, oftentimes it's like a multiple string of failures before they hit on one thing. And one of the lessons that I've learned in just observing a lot of this activity is that it's almost like you just got to stay in the game long enough, and eventually it'll work. It's like you're in a boxing match. Just stay in the ring. Make sure you're still there around 12, and guess what? You got a shot, right? Whereas, and this is where a lot of the privilege comes in, because if you have the wherewithal to survive a long period of time without, a secure income, that is a huge competitive advantage for you. If you can survive multiple experiments, you can experiment for longer, that is a huge benefit for you. Those are probably the two main things that I would say, ahead of things like team, ahead of things like product, ahead of things like any of that. Those two elements are going to give you that advantage. And reducing sort of extending the runway by moving to India, I think, is one of the smartest things you could do. And again, in future, maybe people will not have to sort of enter into a place where your runway is inherently short because of the cost concerns, but you could actually do some cool entrepreneurial stuff in places where the living expenses are far lower. Tell us about sort of when you decided to put it on the line, as you say, Mehul. A lot of people don't get there, right? A lot of people have the thought, but they don't actually get there. What was the moment that you realized you're going to do it? Was there like an event that you can recall that caused you to say, right, this is happening?
So when we were moving back to India, at that time itself, we were pretty much decided, me and my wife, right, that we will try out some entrepreneurial stuff after moving back to India. Maybe it was a glass ceiling, we couldn't do it here in US, who knows? But we were somehow under impression that once we go back there, we should be able to take more risk and attempt these things. So that was pretty much decided that we will do that. Now, exactly what we will do, we weren't sure yet. We had some couple of ideas about, skills development, and something around the skills was my passion. I thought we'll do that. On networking and kind of a virtualization world, I knew that the kind of money and the kind of fundings that you would require to do something drastically new would be a very big check that you will need. And Bangalore at that time, at least for me, I didn't think that was the right environment. If I want to do that, Bay Area would have been the right environment. So if I go in that path, then maybe I will do some kind of effectively a mom and pop shop of some kind of a services industry where I can still make an impact, but it will not be a product. It will not be a real startup, right? So those were the kind of options that I was considering. And then meanwhile, I took a job that will give me some more experience to work closer to customers, so in Cisco. So I was doing that. And then in 2014, I was really, really frustrated. It's been 3-4 years. We have moved back and I'm not able to take any leap of faith. Now, what can we do? And then I realized that, okay, what is blocking me as of now is I'm working full-time for a company, so I cannot simply openly explore anything, right? So I decided, let me take the contract position, let me become a consultant. So for me, it was a little step by step, that okay, I leave my full-time job, become a consultant, so I can openly explore other ideas and whatnot. I can put it on my LinkedIn, So that was the first step I took. And then, the first experiment was with flow learning. The flow part of the FloCareer and flow learning was, this concept of flow, right? You are experiencing the flow. So you are doing the work that you really love, just time just freezes and you are really into that, right? Like when a musician is playing a symphony, or, you're writing something, or you're writing a beautiful piece of code, or maybe a great Excel spreadsheet, which is very complex and interesting, right? So, that time you are really into it, right? So that was the whole idea, right? So it was around the skills development and so on. This was my first experiment.
That's great. I love this explanation, Mehul, particularly with regards to, the incremental kind of distance that you needed to create between you and the employer, because I think a lot of people that are full-time employed do have these great ideas, but I do think it is kind of impossible to parallel process that, because as an employee, if you're doing full service to doing the due respect to your employer, you don't necessarily control all of your time, or certainly not all of your energy. You need to put the energy and time to the employer. And to do stuff on the weekend or after hours and stuff, that I think that's almost a superhuman sort of effort to try and do. You need to have a really good idea or something to push that through. But to step back somewhat to say, you know what, as a consultant or a contractor, even psychologically, that shifts a little bit, because you can say, I'm a supplier of services, you compensate with the rate, but that's where there's like a little bit of a barrier emerge, and then suddenly you can start working on your own stuff. So maybe that's a pathway for people who are watching this and thinking, okay, I want to do my own thing. A lot of people do have this, but they don't make the move. Maybe a change of relationship with your employer initially could be a kind of a stepping stone approach, which might work. Secondly, by the way, I need to compliment your wife, Mehul, because having a partner that is supportive on the journey and a co-partner in the journey, I think is so, so important. If you are, fortunate enough to have a partner and family and so on like this, I think without alignment, this is also going to be extraordinarily difficult, because the risks that you're taking include more than yourself. So great that your spouse was able to support you in that, and then the spouse becomes actually a big accelerator, a big force multiplier, because you've got someone to support you, rather than someone who, hugely important.
I mean, for any individual, right? It is very important factor in your life, right? I mean, if that part is not functioning smoothly, it would have its kind of it takes a toll mentally and emotionally, right? So
you can't do it. You can't do it if you have a dysfunctional relationship. I don't think you can do entrepreneurship. I think it just sucks too much out of you to try and repair the relationship, or to try, you're coming home. It's not a safe place. It's a high stress scenario. So how are you going to do your job? How are you going to work on an idea? You need to have some mental calmness to do that. So absolutely, I think the personal side is just completely intermingled with the entrepreneurial side.
No, absolutely, yeah.
When did you know the first idea wasn't working, Mehul? So you had the flow, sort of the skills idea. What told you that wasn't working? When did you decide to pivot? Because I think that's an important thing also to learn as an entrepreneur. Sometimes we quit too early on an idea, we bail on it because the first customer didn't do this. Sometimes we persist too long. I think that's more common, and you realize you just drain all of your resources and drain all of your spirit, and then you don't do it again. When did you know and pick the time? Okay, we need to pivot.
Sure. I mean, you have to be kind of data driven at the end of the day, right? I mean, you have your emotions, you believe in things, but you have to understand that, okay, maybe the market is not ready for this, or maybe you were too idealistic, or some of those parameters, right? Like, is there a big enough market for what I'm trying to do? Maybe the timing is not right? So it's very, very important that you also have a few friends who can really tell you the truth in your face, right? If you have those, that's probably one of the biggest asset you would have in life, right? So they can also tell you that, hey, you know what, you brainstorm, you look around, you look at the data, you give your 100%, you give enough time too, right? That's important, that you don't give up too early. And that's always a difficult question, right? And I have some friends, in fact, right now, who are in that kind of a situation, right? And it becomes very difficult there's never a black and white answer there, right? So somebody has to discover the answers by themselves. But yes, I would say very important thing is to adapt and change the strategy and do something differently, right? If you don't do that, if you hit a wall and keep banging your head to the wall, it's not gonna make any difference. You have to find a way around it.
How much of that is intuition, or how much of it is about the data? Like maybe there's two ways to look at this, Mehul. Do you, for instance, set out objective criteria to make a decision where you say, you know what, I'm going to give this 12 months exactly, and then on 12 months, I'm going to look and it needs to hit these numbers. If it doesn't hit these numbers, we're pivoting. So in other words, you've already set a bunch of triggers, and if then kind of situation going forward. Do you do it that way? Or do you kind of say, okay, there's a feeling that causes you to think, you know what, we just chew, it's grinding now. And I'm going to go this way because of the grind. Like, is it like art and science? Like, how do we play this one? Like, what's your thoughts?
I would say the big part is the data itself. Because your feelings, it will be very difficult to kind of, you might be in a bad mood or bad feeling because of, things not going right. But, certain events, certain friends, certain, things that influences you can change it, within a day or two also, right? So that's an emotional roller coaster ride when you are facing, these difficulties. But you need to look at, okay, as a startup, okay, I have given a year or I have given 2 years, and what is my revenue? What's my growth? Is this the kind of growth I should be seeing early on, right? That's the answer that you need to, be really, really, look very closely to those questions, right? And that will tell you, and then you, if you are into that kind of a situation, you just put a time limit that, okay, so far where I stand, I'm not satisfied with that. This is not how a startup should be. Okay, let me try this 2 more things or 3 more things and give 6 months and see how it goes, right? And I genuinely change, course. I genuinely find different ways to attack the problem, right? And that would give you the results if the market is out there. But at the end of the day, you have to listen to the market. Market is the king, and it has always been, right? So that's very important. And the only way you can do that is by data. Without data, and it cannot be just an emotional decision.
That's right. And the data you gather by interacting with the market. There was a conversation I had just today about this, where, if you don't, the best information is actually direct primary source data from your customers. You can try and do all the validation from all of the people around you and all of this stuff. That's all well and good. Do all the strategizing. That's all well and good, important. But the most important information is actually what this customer is doing, not what they're saying even. Like, how are they actually operating with your system? Are they spending time on it? Are they coming back to it? Those are the things you care about. And it's almost like, none of your plans are ever going to survive contact with the customer. As the customer's going to basically do what they want with the thing, and then you'll learn from that. That's what you got to learn. You got to understand and adapt the service. So let's talk about this adaptation, because it's. Go ahead, Mehul.
On that note, right? Like, again, whether to decide, whether to use emotions to decide to quit something or use the data to do that, right? That reminds me, one of the very interesting quote from, Richard Branson, right? So Richard Branson said that nothing bad has ever happened with me in my life. That he has mentioned that multiple times. I mean, it's not possible now, right? I mean, everybody, in their life, good and bad things happen with them. But what he means by that, he said that I cannot recall anything ever bad happening to me. He chooses to always remember the positive part. And he chooses not to take the baggage of the negative past with him, right? Because with that baggage, you cannot run, right? So that has influenced me a lot. So if you want to use emotions, you use emotions only for the positive sides, right? You don't use the emotions to kind of that will bring you down, right?
Yo, that's actually really, really profound, Mehul. Because you what you're saying is that yes, emotions kind of emerge, like they emerge within sort of us. But you can sort of control your experience of them, or you can kind of control which ones are more prominent in your own kind of the mind space, so to speak. Yeah, so you don't allow any emotion to overly dominate sort of your behavior if you choose not to. So in other words, maybe you don't choose the emotions, but you can choose which ones are important to lean on and sit within. Yeah. I think that's really profound. Isn't that profound, folks? That's important. That it goes beyond entrepreneurship. In fact, it goes to the kind of the piloting of your own life, because there's too many people that unfortunately are almost a victim of their emotion, where you can see they're not in control because something will happen. It will cause them either to have a huge emotional spike, and you can see that, you know what, they're not in control of it. This can be exhilarating, this can be great if it's a positive emotion, but they're still not in control of it. And the counter sort of experience might also be the case, and there'll be a huge drop. Of course, these days we understand a lot of these are mental health issues and so forth, which I fully respect. But I do wonder whether there's an element where we can exert some kind of control to give ourselves some internal balance that might help us deal with some of these issues a little bit better, particularly if you are doing something that is higher risk, where you can expect emotional turbulence, right? I mean, if you're setting up a business, you and your wife decide, okay, this may be like income free for X amount of time. Of course, that's going to be a more turbulent emotional scenario than simply doing a job as per you do. Let's talk about FloCareer. Why did this become the idea? Because, since that time, obviously you've gone and raised some money. It's been great. You're moving forward. Things seem to be pointing in the right direction. How did you stumble upon the idea of this one from the earlier failures that you had?
Sure. So it has kind of a connection with the earlier failure that we had in terms of the flow learning. What we had was, we had this industry experts, the freelancers, right? And, we had this, fresh graduates who are supposed to be trained by these folks so that, they will find a good placement and whatnot, right? So those were the components that we had, right? So we looked at in the middle of 2018, almost towards 2019 is when we repivoted. So we looked at it and said, hey, what are the components we had? We had a bunch of freelancers. We had a platform to kind of, deal with them and whatnot. Video interviewing kind of a platform, we had. So we thought that, okay, and the B2C was one of the reasons we kind of failed because we didn't have much experience in that space. But B2B seemed more kind of within the grasp, of doing things. So again, we looked at these components that we had, and then we decided, okay, how about, we solve another very important problem that persists, as part of the hiring. And, we can use these freelancers now, not to train, but to take interviews of the candidates for the company. And, another thing that I believe is, job creation is the solution of almost all, if not all, most of the problems in the world, right? Now, you yourself cannot create so many jobs, but if you can make efficient for others, to kind of, fulfill the, requirement for the jobs, right? That would be a wonderful impact. So that purpose will drive you. We already have some components ready. This is a real problem. Let's test the waters. So we did that, and early 2019, is where we had first paying large customer. And again, we saw that, okay, we were growing almost 5 to 10% month over month. And that was the indication that, yeah, this looks like this is something that's clicking now.
That's great. How did that feel, Mehul? When you made the pivot and you started to see it working, like, tell us a little bit about how that made you feel.
Of course, yeah, there is nothing like, looking that graph going up, every month you see 5-10% growth, right? During those early days. Then came COVID, and we had a big dip for about 3 months when we had a nationwide lockdown. But post that, we were growing 25-30% month over month. Right? So
yeah, because the world had moved to video, right? So suddenly it just accelerated the journey, and that's fantastic. And then, of course, you move further forward and get some significant funding through to support the growth of it. tell us, for the people who don't know FloCareer, tell us what it is. It's actually a really remarkable solution. We got a little bit of an hint on it. So you got a bunch of freelancers on platform, and they actually do the interviewing on behalf of employers. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So we have effectively done the Uberization of interviews, right? So it's same as Uber, right? In Uber, you book a cab, and what the platform does is, it will figure out, okay, they have probably hundreds of thousands of drivers around across the country. They will notify only the nearby folks so that they will come. One of them will come and pick you up, right? So we have done the same thing for interviews. The HR team can upload the resume on the platform, and the platform figures out who are the best interviewers for this job for this company, right? And one of the guys, will pick up the candidate and schedule the interview. So now the HR doesn't have to worry about scheduling the interview. The in-house team, which is busy doing their core work, they don't have to deal with so many interviews. And at the same time, the gig workers are like kind of, really making a good money out of
it. Did you everyone get this? Like, this is a I think a unique innovation. I don't know of a single business out there that is even doing something similar to this. It is the Uberization of interviewing. So imagine this: you're hiring for X role, and you upload the candidate CV onto FloCareer, and FloCareer will basically find the people who would be hiring managers or assessors for this role. And these will be people who will be outside of your company. They'll have no stake. Think about the D&I kind of value to this. They'll have no kind of emotional commitment one way or the other. Their job is purely to interview whether this person is competent at the job. And that is basically kind of almost like getting rid of a lot of the cultural biasy issues that you might find within your business. I don't know of a single organization doing it. I can understand why you guys raised some money on this, because it seems to me like a really exciting and potentially global, right? I love the fact that you could get to a point where any role that has an interview component. Some jobs don't require this, but most jobs do have this interview component. You could sort of expand this to almost any job, as long as you have the people who are on the platform, they can do it. And guess what? These people don't need to be permanently hired by the platform. I could do it, right? I could put myself forward as an interviewer. Is that correct? And start interviewing recruiters, for instance. Is that possible?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, relevant skills and expertise. We always match the gig workers with the jobs. So yes, yeah, anybody can apply and yeah.
So what this democratize. It's also Uberization. I know Uber's kind of had they kind of gone through the PR mill as well, but they did actually create an innovation that was really remarkable, which was unlock excess capacity. Right. So everyone had cars. You're not driving your car 24/7. There is time when you can pick somebody up and do it right. And I think interviewing is the same. Like we have basically concentrated interviewing into only a few people in a company and overloaded them often. So if you imagine sort of you're hiring for a technology role or whatnot, guess what? The CTO probably has involvement there. Senior tech engineers have to be interviewed. They're hugely important people in the business that may have like major urgent deadlines, and you've got to say, hey, there's 10 people you've got to interview. So it's totally locked in. But imagine if you could kind of just spread it around. You can guarantee this interview at the same quality, but you could diffuse the responsibility of assessing to this global marketplace where there's going to be excess capacity somewhere, right? So
it's like any other cloud solutions, right? Where you are suddenly, tapping into a much bigger capacity. Because, I mean, if you take an example, let's say you have a 10 people team and you want to double it because of the growth. Now you want to hire 10 more people, and to hire each person, in tech industry, we have seen anywhere between 15 to 20 interviews to hire one person. So even if you are, more efficient, 15 per seat, it means 150 interviews. Now your 10 people team will take probably 2-3 weeks to do that. On FloCareer platform, you can get it done within 24 hours because, we have 4,000 interviewers. So you are tapping into a much bigger capacity.
Yeah, and the capacity is I guess what FloCareer also has is redundant capacity. In other words, it can scale your assessment up. So the times when, for instance, there is like a big interview spike. In fact, there's something I'm going to be talking about soon, where there's companies that have mega scale responsibilities, right? Where sometimes they can have a requirement where, oh, I need to hire 10,000 people in 2 weeks. That kind of level of recruiting. Yeah, you can't just get your team to go and interview those people. You need some sort of solution. So this kind of thing might be providing that type of support. Very quickly for the audience here, Mehul, what kind of like roles do you typically recruit for now, and what is the plan in future for you to also provide a service against?
So currently, most of the interviews we conduct are in the space of tech jobs, technology jobs. And in technology jobs, we have like almost 200 plus skills we have done the interviews. We have more than 300,000 interviews under our belt by now. So in tech jobs, pretty much any skill you name it, we would have interviewers for that. But we are also kind of now moving towards more kind of opening up ourselves to other domains. In US, we have started just recently the interviews for the healthcare and the nursing domain. And guess what? First time ever, the nurses would have an opportunity to work from home, because of our platform, right? So, nursing has been a very, very, high stress, high strain job, especially, the whole ecosystem has been exhausted because of the COVID. And, now if somebody wants to say, hey, I want to work 30 hours, doing the actual nursing, and maybe 10 hours, I just want to do interviews, we will be making that possible for them.
That's amazing, because the nursing is a really critical example, because I think you're absolutely right. The system has been absolutely depleted in terms of energy, and lots of people are leaving public health there because of this reason. And we absolutely need those people. And yes, they're going into different industries and so forth. But why are we losing that institutional knowledge? Because those ex-nurses could now become absolutely perfect assessors for the next generation of candidates that we need to go and recruit. So FloCareer can help kind of solve the labor force reallocation issue, because it means that you have the ability to assess new people coming through the flow, which is part of the problem of failure to replace, is because you don't actually know who's good or bad. You don't have enough assessors to do it. So FloCareer might provide kind of this place where people can go and continue to assess. I wonder whether this would be really good for early retirees, any job, right? Let's say you want to downshift in some way. A lot of people, guess what? They don't want to work 45, 50, 60 hours a week. Maybe the past that, they want to switch down. Okay, great. But they have all of this knowledge. Why are they not doing something like super valuable, like assessing the next generation that can come through? So
absolutely, yeah, no, that's it has been a very a great win-win-win situation. For candidates, it's a winning situation, because they see the interview getting scheduled very quickly. They get a sense of learning when they leave the table. For interviewers, as you mentioned, there are a lot of situations where people who wants to work remotely for certain reasons, or they want to take early retirement or a semi-retired, or whatever they want to do, right? They can still do a very meaningful job. And for the employers, right, not only just the turnaround time, but you kind of touched upon those points about the entire DEI kind of situation for diversity and equity. Now it's an unbiased interview, because we structure these interviews. That's one of the very critical secret sauce we have, is we structure these interviews. We have a very good repository of lateral hire interview questions. Not a lot of companies pay attention to the interviewing, apart from probably Google and Amazon, which has put a lot of thoughts around interviewing. So we make that possible for everyone to have a very structured interviews, to remove the biases from the process.
Yeah, and even if we accept, and I know there's some critics out there that it's now cool to say you can never remove bias, right? Which is probably true. We can say that human beings will always have heuristics. But one of the things that kind of creating the sort of having the interviews conducted on platform rather than in company is that at the very least you are diffusing the bias outside of the company. You're pushing it out. So in other words, you might have some inherent issues within your organization based on things like workforce homogeneity or whatever it is that's in there that causes these frictions. But you can push it out to a totally different platform that has none of the legacy issues that you have in your business, and that can create a different experience for the people coming through in process. How fascinating that is.
Yeah, I mean, not only just the cultural and those kind of biases, but what sometimes happens in the companies apart from that, those biases, a pure kind of personality related biases. What I mean by that is somebody can be very lenient in the interviewing, somebody can be very strict in the interviewing, right? Here we are structuring the interview. We have a lot of heuristics, a lot of data to say that, okay, these interview question is most suitable for medium-sized, this kind of companies, for that kind of skills in this domain. So we create that pool of questions and associate that with a job. So no matter who takes the interview, the difficulty level hovers in the similar kind of level.
Yeah. I think it's a fascinating. Like I say, I don't think I've heard of a product like this. And I see a lot of recruitment tech. So this is actually a real interesting innovation to see. Mehul, you've actually moved back to the US. And I guess this was tied in some way to obviously raising funds and obviously needing to do all of those things. Tell us about the journey there, because that's an interesting insight for a lot of people who might be thinking about going down the recruitment technology or the technology startup route. When did you realize that actually fundraising was the right thing to do? And when you had to make the shift back to the US, how did you handle that situation, the emotional side and the practical side as well?
Sure. So when we started seeing this amazing growth, post-COVID situation where people are more open to, remote hiring, remote working and whatnot, and we were growing 25-30% month over month, right? And so that was the time to kind of reach out and go really global. We always had that ambition, and we wanted to come to get back. Our company was anyways registered in US, and India was a subsidiary. That's how we structured, because we knew this concept is a global concept. So that's when we got funded by two VCs, one in Boston, one in Bay Area. And given the fact that a lot of our traditional customers have been from the East Coast, we decided we need to have the team locally present and make this concept now successful in US and at a global stage. So that was the whole idea, and that's why I decided to move back to US, so that we can repeat our success story here in US.
Yeah, and how was the move, Mehul? You've been away for 10 years. You did the chunk, and then you came back. Different place, obviously. You're in Boston now. But how have you reacclimated? I think over time, as you get older as well, I think maybe your ability to seamlessly shift as well. So tell me about how it is to start again in a different city.
So I mean, I am very fortunate and lucky, kind of like to kind of have this, going back and forth, most of the times, and you are also an immigrant, probably your parents or grandparents, they have this, whether we accept or not, but they have the minority complex, right? So they will go to your own kind of, like the Indians will go to the Indian supermarkets and Indian stores and whatnot, right? Now that I have paid my dues, right, to India, I don't feel compulsion for that. I'm more interested to kind of be part of, how, to understand the US at a, at a cultural level, at a much deeper sense, right? And I don't feel compulsion that I have to go to Indian store and do Indian stuff to continue to prove myself, my affinity.
No, I totally get what you mean. But hey, that shouldn't mean like denying yourself some Indian desserts and stuff like this. You know what I'm saying? It's like, make sure you have the gulab jamun still on hand. No matter what, no matter how acclimated you get to the US. And I am going to be in Chinatown tomorrow. I want to have some dim sum. Been a while, so that's going to happen. Okay, Mehul, we're coming to the end of the conversation. I get the feeling we can keep talking forever, but so we don't have the time to do this. So let's just cover off a few more questions that I think the audience might want to hear. FloCareer, what exciting things can existing customers or the product expect in 2022 into 2023? What's happening down the pipe?
So we are doing a lot of work in terms of making our pool of interviewers truly global. So we are bringing a lot of people from Latin America, Eastern Europe, and so on and so forth, right? So this is to increase our coverage across the globe, right? So that's something that we are doing. We are also incorporating more and more intelligence into the platform in terms of a lot of machine learning based match of interview questions, and so on and so forth, right? So a lot of automation, a lot of that will enable us even at greater scale. Currently we are doing almost 20,000 interviews a month on the platform, and we are kind of hoping to grow this at a multiple fold this year. So a lot of automation, additional automation, and increasing our scope geographically of our interviewers. Those are the two critical things I would say.
Yeah, amazing. It's almost like this is the time to scale it out and get more people using the platform and being able to actually put jobs through it or put interviews through it. Because I think people will be excited to try this. It seems to solve a lot of the problems of pipeline and assessment load in a very D&I and debiasing in a very unique way. Okay, cool. Let's final word, Mehul, for the young people out there or people who are thinking about, the entrepreneurial path. What kind of advice would you give them? Parting advice to say, you know what, here's something I've learned through, being part of this and also doing my own journey. What's the one thing that this person should know before they embark?
So, if I have to pick only one thing, I would say that, I have seen people smarter than me in my life around me, but what has helped me to kind of, grow both financially and experience-wise and whatnot is your ability to take the risk. You have to take the risk, and when you take a risk, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you have to quit your job and do something, right? You can take small risks in your daily work also, right? You have been doing things in certain way and take risk and just do it slightly differently and see how it goes, right? So that's very, very important. And probably very close to that is to have that couple of good friends who can give you a really good feedback, right? That's absolutely important.
You know what, those pre-built for relationships, like the relationships you build before an agenda, without an agenda, they're the people that will always be able to, if you have that crew of people around you, that's like, again, almost like a superpower. It's a +1 bonus point on your journey as an entrepreneur. Okay, Mehul, listen, I've taken way too much of your time. You've got busy things to do. What is happening for you in terms of after this call? What stuff is back on schedule for the CEO of FloCareer?
Keeping in touch with a few customers, right? That is always, we are always customer focused. So yeah, we reaching out to them. That's the agenda for the day today.
Cool.
But thanks for having me. Really appreciate this platform. You guys, I checked out some of the previous other podcasts and whatnot. Very, very interesting forum that you have built here.
No, it's the job of recruiting Brainfood is to bring interesting people and interesting conversations and interesting products to the recruiting community. So hopefully we've managed to do that today. Mehul Bhatt, CEO of FloCareer, thank you so much for your time. It's been great chatting with you.
Thanks for having me, Han. Nice talking to you. Yeah, thank you.
Wow, wasn't he great? What a nice guy he is, Mehul Bhatt. And you know what? I'm actually kind of raving on his product now, and which I typically don't do. But I'm actually found out that there's some light bulbs kind of popped in my head when Mehul was speaking there about how interesting this concept is. I'd love for people to give this a shot. FloCareer.com, folks. If you haven't tried it and you want to try it, go ahead and do it, and let me know what you think. The Uberization of interviewing. Okay, that's about it for today. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in conversations like this, please follow the channel. We do these whenever we have interesting entrepreneurs that want to take part. And also, we are on Friday, Brainfood Live on air. Don't forget this. We are talking sourcing on Reddit, folks. Already 335 people, I think, 335 people, I think, have already registered on that show. We're going to get 500 people watching it, folks. That is the seat limit. So if you haven't already registered, I recommend you do so and don't miss out. We've got Aaron Matthew from PayPal and Vim Damans from Tenet joining us for that show. We're on Friday at 2 p.m. Okay, that's about it. Have a good day, folks. See you on Friday.